Anthony, if we can just zoom out from the US, and we have, of course, a very international list of guests visiting us today. If we can just focus on some of foreign policy implications of this election. Rola asks, what do you think are the main cons to the rest of the world, specifically the UK and EU, if Trump secures another term? Also, we had a question from Colin, who also asks about foreign policy. If there's a Biden victory, what are your views on what will the China strategy be in your views?
Well, I mean, it's a really good question. So let me just stipulate the following, that Mr. Trump has made the country weaker. You know, when I said he made it weaker, sicker, and poorer, let's focus on our alliances and let's say that he's made the country weaker. And so what he's done is he's repudiating and he's denigrating democratic leaders of the West or Asia, and he's offering plaudits to dictators, and he's propping up people that are in autocracies. And so I don't know, you guys may like that. Maybe some of you guys think that's the right strategy. I think it's the wrong strategy for America, and it doesn't reflect well on where America should be at this point in time. And I just want to give people historical context. You know, when the Second World War ended, the United States had about 3.5% of the world's population, 65% of the world's industrial output. And you have to think of these neo-Victorian men and women, but they were mostly men, that set forth the post-World War II architecture. And it actually started with Franklin Roosevelt. People sort of forget this, but it was in 1943 and 1944 that Roosevelt began the process of the United Nations, the acronyms of the World Bank, and all of the different things that we put together in the post-World War II architecture for there to be peace and prosperity. And what the Americans understood at that moment in time, that they needed to be a benevolent democracy helping the world rise with its living standards. So you're going back now to the UN, you're going back now to the General Agreement of Trade and Tariffs, which ultimately became the World Trade Organization, and you're going back to the Marshall Plan. And the idea behind the Marshall Plan was to rebuild, to protect the world and to protect Western democracies and to heal Germany, frankly, and Japan. And it worked. And so what we did was we unevened the trading field. I had this conversation with Mr. Trump many times on the campaign trail. I said, well, we uneven that field to allow for a peaceful rise of living standards around the world. And what we understood is that more interconnectivity, more middle class around the world, less conflict. That worked. Over 80 years, that by and large worked. We've had proxy wars, we've had wars in the Middle East. I'm not trying to diminish them, but we have not had a global conflict, or thank God, the use of military nuclear weapons in the last 75 years. So that worked. In addition to that, the American strategy was to have a form factor of 3 or 4 to 1 in terms of military prowess. We wanted the biggest military for a reason, because we believed in the benevolence of our democracy. So we were less concerned about NATO allies contributing their 1-2%, let's call it, I think it's 2% in the treaty, because we wanted to have a military advantage. And so now here we have Mr. Trump, knuckle-dragging bully, coming into the scene, and he's rejecting this. He's rejecting this in a very simplistic form. He's not recognizing that our military bases around the world, or what we're paying for, is an insurance policy to reduce a conflict. And what I would tell everybody on this call, if you have an interest in these ideas, go back to one of the last speeches that Franklin Roosevelt made, and go to a speech that he made in 1940. You can find these on the internet. In 1940, he made a speech about American engagement in the world because he recognized if we don't engage the world, the forward disaster will be even worse. And so therefore, these are insurance policies that we put in place that have by and large worked. Now, should more people help us with that? Absolutely. But the point being is that if we have another Mr. Trump administration, he will wreck those alliances. He will retract. He will have an America strategy, this America first strategy that's America alone. Now, I'm going to tell you something about him. The good news is he's intellectually vacuous, so he doesn't even understand his worldview. Thank God the son of a bitch, Steve Bannon, is out of the White House. I view that as my single greatest accomplishment so far for American history. When my suicide vest was going off, as I was getting blown out of the White House, I was reaching for Bannon, and I blew him into Pennsylvania Avenue alongside of me, because he is a white nationalist and he is a systemic danger to the world. And so I just want you to imagine him and Mr. Trump together over the last 3 years, what a disaster that would have been for mankind or womankind. And so, but I want to explain, since you've asked me, what Mr. Trump's worldview is, but thank God he doesn't have it crystallized, but Bannon did. So here's Mr. Trump's worldview. He would like to take the United States back to 1890. He would like the United States to be an isolationist country where 95% of what we're manufacturing is consumed inside the United States. So this plastic cup, if it costs $24 to produce it in the United States and a half a penny in India or China, no problem. Let's produce it in the United States. So he wants to disavow the David Ricardo idea of global trade, that no country can get exactly what it needs at the lowest price unless it's willing to trade with the other countries. He wants to disavow that. He wants to literally wall off the country metaphorically and physically from the rest of the world. That's his worldview. And now the United States may be able to do that. We've got lots of natural resources. We might be able to pull that off, but it'll throw the rest of the world into abject poverty, and there will be a crisis born from that. And so we have to stop him. And so I'm out there talking about it, okay? And I'm out there trying to explain it to people what he's really like. And so he will try to deconstruct those alliances. He'll try to retrench the American military in places where we should be. And you're asking me about the situation with China. The Chinese have a long-term plan. You know, you may not like the Chinese Communist Party, or you may like them. I'm just going to be observant about them. I'm not going to really express my opinion, but 100-year plan, a 50-year plan. Go to China 2049. The United States has no plan. We have no politician in our country that says, okay, here's a 10-year plan or a 20-year plan to fix our issues. No plan. We're just going to beat up each other on cable news every night. And so Mr. Trump's going to get annihilated by these guys. Okay. And so therefore, I would love to see Joe Biden win. And I would ask him to consider restoring TPP or entering into that contract. I think that would be a good starting place for us with the Chinese. And so I'm a student of the Chinese history. I understand where they are in terms of how they're thinking. We need to reject some of their thinking, and we need to support some of their thinking. And we may view them as an adversary or a competitor, but whether we like it or not, we've got to figure out a way to get along with each other. And I would implore everybody on this call to read Destined for War by Graham Allison, the dean of the Kennedy School of Government, which talks about these situations throughout history, rising superpowers threatening the existing power structure of the superpower. It first happened in the Peloponnesian Peninsula between Athens and Sparta. Athens was on the rise. Sparta got nervous and hit Athens. And Thucydides wrote about this in the Peloponnesian War. Everybody thought the war was going to last a short period of time. 3 decades later, it wiped out both city-states. And so what we know is there's been 16 episodic events where a rising superpower threatens the existing power structure. In 12 of those periods of time, we have gone to war. We cannot afford to do that right now. Neither country can afford to do that. So we have to work together. We have to figure out ways where we can be economically integrated, diplomatically satisfied with each other, so that we can advance our civilization, the global civilization, for greater peace and prosperity. And we have to figure out, if you're wealthy on this call, if you're an elite, God bless you, but we have to figure out a way to help our brothers and sisters, because me personally, I don't want to live in a barbed wire security compound in my McMansion while my fellow neighbors are suffering. Okay, I just don't want to be like that. So we have to figure that out. And if we don't figure it out, you're going to have the government mandating it through things that don't work, like socialism. So I'm off my soapbox, Gaurav. I'm sorry. I'm pretty fired up about this stuff because it's life or death for people. Okay, and we're at a very interesting inflection point, and we need reasoned people who understand global history and are able to respect each other and respect each other's differences We don't need xenophobia and isolationism right now.